What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we're going to be breaking down all of the main card fights from this weekend's UFC card, and this is the best event I've seen for betting in quite a while. From top to bottom there's interesting, complex and competitive fights, so we've got a lot to talk about in this video. We're going to be going through so much, we're going to be going into a lot of depth on these fights, so chill out, sit back, relax, and hopefully you'll find the information in this video useful. Now, if you like these breakdowns for the main card fights, don't forget that you can get breakdown videos for all the prelim matchups on this card on my website, MMABettingTips.com. You'll find a link for that in the description below. And also, there is a rare opportunity right now to join my live betting group. Over the last 3 years, spaces in my live betting group have been pretty much permanently sold out because, as you can see here, basically the more people that try to bet the same thing at the same time in live betting, the faster the odds become suspended or decline pretty rapidly. So for that reason I capped the number of people in our group, and as a result, because we perform so well, you can see our profitability chart here. Spaces don't come up very often because people don't leave very often because, well, as you can see, pretty much every single month over the last sort of 6 years we've been profitable. Very, very rare that we have a dip or hit a bad spot. So rare opportunity for you to join at the moment, and like I say, when the spaces fill up, people don't usually leave, so you don't get an opportunity to join for a long time. I make my living from live betting on MMA. I think you'll like it a lot, so give it a try. And if you've never live bet on the UFC before, you have done a little bit of live betting on the UFC, I think anyone's going to get value out of this service, because if you watch every UFC event live anyway, obviously I can't make no promises, can't make no guarantees, because past performance doesn't indicate future results. But if you look at how I've done over the last 6 years, the fact I do this for a living, I mean, if you watch UFC every weekend and you're going to be betting the fights live anyway, this is probably right up your street. And if you don't like it, if you sign up, you don't like it, give you your money back anyway. Just send me a DM, email, get in touch. I'm very accessible, and I'll give you a refund. But like I say, the fact that this is permanently sold out, for the vast majority of the last 3 years, kind of tells you everything you need to know about how good it is when you experience it firsthand. Don't really want to talk too much about what it's like. I like to keep the secret sauce as secret as possible, but give it a try and you probably won't be disappointed. Also, really appreciate everyone that hit the like button on last week's video. It makes such a big difference. Like, I don't know why I even say this, man. Like, most weeks I just forget to ask you guys to hit the like button and subscribe, because like, I'm not the best on camera, man, and so yeah, I kind of just forget to do it. Yeah, man, like last week, tons of you hit the like button on a video for me, and it boosted the views on it like crazy. It makes such a big difference, so I'd really appreciate it if you could do that for me again this week. I don't have time to do it over under live stream this week because, like I said earlier on, this is a massive card, man. There's 14 fights on this card, and there's such interesting fights from top to bottom. Really complex matchups. So this event this weekend is taking me a lot longer to research than usual, just because the fights are just very complex. It takes a lot more time watching footage from matchups like this to kind of work out most likely ways they're likely to go. If maybe, with a regular fight, I would go back and watch maybe the last 2 or 3 recent fights from both guys to try and visualize and understand how they match up, against one another. Many of the fights on this card are so complex you have to go further back and maybe watch 4 or 5 of the last 5 fights from both guys, which obviously increases the amount of time it takes to work through this card quite a lot. So yeah, man, if you could hit the like button for me, I'd appreciate it. But I won't have time to do an over-under live stream this week because the research is going to go right down to the wire. If you did want to join live betting this week, or my live betting group this week, or sign up to catch the breakdown videos for all the prelim matchups on this card, of which there are fantastic prelims on this card, just need to come to my website, scroll down, and this is basically going to give you access to the breakdown videos and all my bets for this card, as well as the VIP chat room, although I will be sharing quite a few bets with you in this video. And this is what you'll need to go to get the live betting. And yeah, man, give it a try. I'm sure you'll like it. Like I say, if you don't, just get in touch and I'll give you a refund anyway. It's no problem. So I'm going to close that down because it will lag the stream out. And yeah, let's kick things off with the main event, which is Cory Sandhagen and Yadong Song. Before I do jump into breaking that fight down, just also want to let you guys know that this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not telling you what to do. You can also switch back down there. There we go. I'm not telling you what to do. Gambling is extremely difficult to make money on. Very, very few people do it. It's some may say the most difficult thing to do in the world. Others think making money from betting on any sport is impossible. It's not. I'm living proof of that. But I can tell you it is extremely difficult, which is probably why so many people are very bad at making money betting on sports. It's not what you see online though. If you go on Twitter, if you go on Instagram, it seems like pretty much everyone that bets on sports is profitable, which can create an artificial perception of reality and make you think that you're some kind of failure or terrible at betting if you're not making money, because everyone online seems to be. But the reality is that it's an extremely difficult thing to do. You go on Instagram, you see these guys wearing their Gucci tracksuits with their bundles of cash on the table in their hotel room, with the hot girls driving around in Rolls Royces and staying in fancy hotel rooms. It's all a fugazi. It's all an illusion, man. The only way you can make money, the only way you can be successful at most things in life is working hard and putting a lot of time and effort into getting really good at something. And betting on MMA is no different. I spend basically all my fucking life chained to this desk, sat here, studying fight footage, researching hard to give me an edge over the betting sites, which enables me to be profitable, like I say, earn a living live betting UFC. But the only reason why I can do that is because of the amount of effort, the amount of time, the amount of research that I put into researching these fights. And so, do your own research. And yeah, I'm not telling you what to do in this video. Do your own research. Think for yourselves. This video is for entertainment purposes only. What I will say is I've been betting on MMA for a very long time now. I've been profitable on MMA for a really long time. And I put tens and tens and tens of hours into researching the fights every week. So while it is brutally difficult to make money betting on MMA, I do have a lot of experience in this area. And a lot of work has gone into preparing for the information I'm going to share with you in this video. So I hope you get a lot of use out of it, and yeah, hopefully you can do well this weekend. Hopefully I can help you make better betting decisions this weekend. All the information I'm going to share with you in this video is coming from a really good place. I haven't just made it up, plucked it out of thin air. It doesn't come from hazy memories. Everything I'm sharing with you has come from me sitting down, watching footage and relaying to you what I've seen, based on things that I've witnessed in the last sort of 2 to 3 days. So it's all very fresh in my head. So good luck for this weekend, and hit the like button if you like these videos. Let's get into the first fight, the main event, which is Cory Sandhagen against Yadong Song. A fantastic main event between two rising stars in the bantamweight division. I absolutely love this fight, and as ever, we'll kick things off by taking a look at the odds. I was already having a little look at the next card, trying to spot how this Mackenzie Dern Yan Xiaonan card looks for betting, but we're not going to get to that yet. Let's go back to this weekend's card. So if we take a look at the odds on Sandhagen, he is around an average of 1.50, which is minus 200 for an implied probability of 67%. If we take a look at the odds on Yadong Song, he's around an average of 2.60, which is going to be plus 160 for an implied probability of 38%. So, gotta be honest, I was quite surprised at the odds on this fight. They're two brilliant up-and-coming fighters in the bantamweight division. I mean, can we even call Sandhagen up-and-coming? Probably not. He's obviously been in the title picture for a while, but obviously hasn't become champion yet. And I think this fight is, scheduled to establish the #1 contender, or, someone who is going to be fighting for a title very, very soon. I think the fact they've made these two the main event speaks volumes. Obviously, you've got a big fight between O'Malley and Peter Yang coming up, but Sandhagen and Song are right in that title mix in the bantamweight division. But even though both these guys are very good, I do think Sandhagen is a lot better than Song in every single aspect of MMA. And I'm really surprised by the odds on this matchup. I know the odds of 1.50 minus 200 is pretty steep. Sandhagen is a decent sized favourite, but every week we see guys as massive favourites, right? 1.20, 1.25, which is minus 500, minus 400. You know, in that odds range, which you just know do not deserve to be in that odds range. I mean, I see every single week so many guys get overvalued. And yet when you have a truly legitimate elite fighter with advantages over his opponent almost everywhere, the bookies are throwing up what I think are pretty generous odds on Sandhagen. Because when I'm capping a fight, when I'm breaking a fight down and I'm trying to work out what probability both guys have got of winning, what I'm really focusing on is what path to victory both guys have. And I think when you consider how both these guys match up from a stylistic point of view, Yadong Song doesn't have many paths to victory. Sandhagen has a lot of paths to victory. And so for that reason, I'm surprised Sandhagen's not a bigger favourite. Now, we're going to go through all those paths to victory, obviously. But we'll start off by taking a look at the tail of the tape, where the advantages really start for Sandhagen. So he's 30 years old, 5'11", with a 70-inch reach. Yadong Song, 24 years old, 5'8", with a 67-inch reach. So we can see that Sandhagen is a little taller and has a 3-inch reach advantage against Yadong Song, which isn't huge. It does, you know, a 3-inch reach advantage isn't going to give Sandhagen a massive statistical advantage in this fight. But the way that Sandhagen uses it accentuates that reach and height. So Sandhagen is a guy that knows how to use his length. He knows how to fight long. He's abnormally long and tall for the bantamweight division, but he's not one of these guys that's abnormally long and tall like a James Vick and has to kill himself to make the weight limit. He always looks quite athletic, quite strong, quite physically imposing in there. So Sandhagen has all the benefits of being a lot taller, a lot bigger than a lot of the guys in the bantamweight division. Doesn't really have many of the downsides. Like a lot of guys that are abnormally long and tall for the division, think about like a James Vick or a Stefan Struve, they're often quite slow to react to what their opponents do. Their reflexes often aren't the best. They're often quite chinny as well. Sandhagen has none of those weaknesses. You know, he's very strong in those areas. So Sandhagen fights long and knows how to use his length. Compare that to Song, 5'8". You know, he's quite tall for a bantamweight, to be fair. You see a lot of bantamweights are like 5'6", 5'7", but Song has got that, you know, trademark team alpha male body type and style where he's shorter, compact, stocky, muscular, and throws big winging shots. So there's a big difference in the body type of these two, where Sandhagen's long and tall, Song is compact and muscular, but both guys also amplify their body type, I guess, by their styles, where Sandhagen uses length to fight very long, where Song is very compact and throws these short winging hooks. So let's start off by talking how these two guys match up on the ground. And obviously, I think Sandhagen's size is going to give him an advantage in this, because he can land on Song from a range where Song's going to have to bite down on that mouthpiece, come forward, cover a lot of distance, get inside and land, which isn't easy to do because of how good Sandhagen's footwork and movement and ability to read his opponent is. But we'll get into that when we talk about striking. In terms of grappling, this is an area where Sandhagen is going to have a huge advantage. Now, it may not appear to be the case, because to the naked eye, Sandhagen has been submitted by Aljamain Sterling. He's run into problems on the ground against TJ Dillashaw. But we know at 24 years old, Song just hasn't had time to develop his grappling yet. He is primarily a striker, and he does train at a predominantly grappling-based gym, which is Team Alpha Male. But what we've seen from Song up until this point in his career is very bad takedown defense, a very low-level ground game. He's also very weak off his back. If you take him down, you can generally rack up a lot of control time on him. And on top of that, Song's also one of these guys that slows down quite quickly if you make him grapple. So if Sandhagen were to come into this fight with a grappling-heavy game plan, I think it would be an easy night's work for Sandhagen. I actually think he would dominate Song, and this would be a very easy fight. But, like we talk about every single week, fighters often don't take the easiest path to victory, and ego often gets in their way, and they don't use, you know, the game plan and the strategy that is going to make life easy for them. And Sandhagen's one of those guys that just loves to stand and strike. You know, he's a well-rounded mixed martial artist, but his base is striking, and he likes to strike. He likes to win stand-up fights. You very rarely see Sandhagen try to take his opponents down, and he never uses a grappling heavy game plan. However, this is a mixed martial arts fight. The fight could go to the ground, and if it goes to the ground, I would expect Sandhagen to absolutely dominate. He's levels and levels and levels above Song. So as we work our way through this breakdown, and I start to explain the reasons why I think Sandhagen's a good bet this weekend, he's already got the size advantage, and he's also got the grappling advantage. Now, we did talk a little bit there about the fact that Song slows down as well. Before we break down striking, because that's the biggest aspect of this fight, with both guys being strikers, and this fight very likely for the most part taking place on the feet, you've also got to talk about the fact that Song tends to slow down quite a lot as fights wear on. So he's getting better at pacing himself. His cardio is also getting better, but it's undeniable that in 3-round fights, he's a lot worse in round 3 than he is in round 1. He does slow down, does become sloppier as fights wear on, and his volume also falls off a cliff when he starts to get tired. He becomes much easier to hit. In contrast, Sandhagen's gas tank is amazing, and he's one of these guys that gets better as the fight wears on. Sandhagen is very reactive. He likes to read his opponents and, punish them for any little mistake that they make. Sandhagen is a guy that is always trying to work you out, always trying to find his range and settle into a rhythm and get his timing down. And once he does that, because he's such a high-level striker, because he's so good at reading you, when he gets his timing down and he's worked you out, he's absolutely devastating. So this is another aspect of the fight which I think really favours Sandhagen, because Sandhagen is going to get better as the fight wears on, whereas Song is going to get worse as the fight wears on. And when Song becomes tired and his volume starts to drop towards the end of round 2, and he becomes sloppier and easy to hit, I think in rounds 3, 4 and 5, that's where Sandhagen can really start to put a pace on Song, rack up major volume and run away with the fight. Because remember, Sandhagen's a lot more experienced here. Even though, Sandhagen's got 18 pro fights and Song's got a lot more, what you've got to remember here is that Sandhagen's also 6 years older than Song, so he's probably spent a lot more time in the gym training, even if he hasn't had as many pro fights. Sandhagen's had more time to develop his body and, just learn how to use his body to his advantages. On top of that, we've also seen Sandhagen's last 2 fights go the distance. There were 5-rounders. So Peter Yan and TJ Dillashaw, undoubtedly 2 of the greatest bantamweight fighters of all time. And Sandhagen has got extremely valuable experience going the distance with both of them. So in his last 2 fights, he's gone 50 minutes. He's been in the cage for almost an hour against 2 of the best bantamweights to ever live. So he's learned how to pace himself. He's learned what it feels like, tired and hurt in that 4th and 5th round, and he knows how his body's going to react in those positions. He's going to be ready for it. There's going to be no surprises for Sandhagen coming in this weekend. Song is a great fighter, but he's nowhere near as scary as Peter Yan or TJ Dillashaw. So Sandhagen's been there, he's done it all, he's seen it all, he's got the t-shirt, and that experience of knowing what going 5 hard rounds against an elite fighter feels like will pay off big time for Sandhagen this weekend, because he's going to be a lot more comfortable in there than Song is, who's never fought 5 rounds before, never been in a main event, never been in a 5-rounder. He's still getting to grips with pacing himself over 3 rounds against high-level competition in the UFC. It's the reason why he struggled against guys like Kyler Phillips and just scraped past Casey Kenny. At 24 years old, Song is still learning. He's still on the come up, and to go from scraping past guys like Casey Kenny and winning or losing a fight against Kyler Phillips to suddenly jumping into a 5-round main event against Sandhagen, it's a huge leap forward for Song. Probably too much too soon. You never know what's going to happen in MMA. Maybe Song lands a bomb and knocks Sandhagen out, but it's pretty unlikely for all the reasons I'll describe now, which is a nice little segue into talking about how these 2 guys match up when it comes to striking, which is obviously where you'd expect the majority of this fight to take place, because both these guys are strikers. So we should see a lot of stand-up here. So as we've already said in this breakdown, 2 completely different approaches to striking. Sandhagen likes to stay light on his feet and use his length to chip away at his opponents with a really diverse range of attacks. Sandhagen's coming at you with every limb on his body. Jabs, hooks, combinations, elbows. leg kicks, body kicks, head kicks, and every single type of combination that mixes all those attacks up with spinning attacks on top, flying attacks, everything. Sandhagen's coming at you with any strike, any technique on the feet you've seen in MMA. That makes him extremely difficult to read, extremely difficult to work out, because you never know what's coming at you. You know if he's throwing a spinning elbow or a head kick. You know if he's throwing a flying knee or a jab. Very difficult to read, very unorthodox, great footwork, great movement, and he brings a lot of weapons to the table. He might not have that raw physicality or power the Song has, but the difference with Sandhagen is that he can throw a massively diverse range of attacks at a very high volume for a very long period of time. So Sandhagen can go hard for 5 rounds and just overwhelm you with so many different techniques, whereas Song is far more limited in his attacks. You'll occasionally see Song, throw kicks, but not too often. For the most part, Song has got a very boxing-based style of fighting, and while he does hit very hard and he is getting better, he's very, very limited in his range of attacks, which doesn't bode well when you're going up against someone like Sandhagen that is such a high-level striker and is so good at reading you. I think that once Sandhagen gets Song's timing down, start to find his range, starts to get comfortable in there, he's going to be able to chip away at Song from behind his footwork, behind his movement, and just outstrike Song and rack up a decent volume. And with the fact that Song slows down as fights wear on, it's just bad news against a guy like Sandhagen that is just going to get better and better and better the worse the Song gets. So I think the footwork, the movement, the length of Sandhagen, and the more one-dimensional style of striking from Song gives Sandhagen such a huge edge in this fight. Now, anything can happen in MMA. It's a very difficult sport to bet, very difficult sport to make money on, so please do your own research on this one. Let me know what you think about this fight in the comments below. But from my perspective, when I look at Sandhagen and Song's path to victory, Song has very, very limited path to victory. When you look at all the advantages Sandhagen has, he's bigger than Song, he's more experienced, he's got a better gas tank, he's very tough and durable, he's got a great chin, he's a significantly better striker, and his style of striking is extremely difficult to deal with. He's got an advantage there too. Not as big of an advantage as he does when it comes to grappling, but Sandhagen's style certainly poses a problem for Song's style. Sandhagen's also training at an extremely good gym. Iron sharpens iron, and he's surrounded by good training partners. There's a lot of things to like about Sandhagen in this fight. When we consider what Song's path to victories are, he's not going to out-grapple Sandhagen. That's definitely not happening. He's not going to be able to outlast Sandhagen because Sandhagen's gas tank is much better. Very unlikely Song's going to be able to outstrike him because Sandhagen throws with a much higher volume and he's better defensively. So really Song's only path to victory here, in my opinion, is to knock Sandhagen out. And while Song is very, very dangerous, hits very hard, and could absolutely land a bomb and knock Sandhagen out, anything can happen in MMA. In my opinion, that is very improbable, because when you look at Sandhagen's record, he's had 18 pro fights and he's never been knocked out. Now, I know Song is a lot more dangerous than many of the guys Sandhagen's fought, but we've still seen him go the distance with heavy hitters like Uri Alcantara. He didn't go the distance, but he fought Uri Alcantara. Fought John Lineker on the feet for 15 minutes. Was never really in trouble on the feet. Marlon Moraes hits like a truck. TJ Dillashaw is dangerous on the feet, admittedly not the most powerful, but Petey Yan's a nightmare, and yet Sandhagen's hung in there with all of them. So while Song is very dangerous and he does hit very hard, Sandhagen's tough, gritty, durable. He's got a good chin, he can take a shot. And when you look at Song, while he does have a good number of wins by knockout, he often goes to a decision as well. So sure, he's knocked out guys like Julio Arce, Marlon Moraes, Alejandro Perez, but I think we can all agree Sandhagen's at a far higher level than all those guys at this stage in their careers. And more often than not, Song does tend to go to a decision. I just don't see Song being able to outwork Sandhagen over 5 rounds. If it was a 3-round fight, I'd be a little bit more nervous about betting Sandhagen in this odds range, but with it being 5 rounds, I just don't see Song having enough in the tank to keep up with Sandhagen in the 4th and 5th. So Sandhagen's only got to win one of the first, second or third rounds to take a decision here. I think it's pretty likely he does that. So like I say, I'm not telling you what to do. Do your own research on this one. That's what I've found in my research, and as a result of what I've found, I'm going to be betting Sandhagen. I hope you found that useful. Now, let's move on to the next fight on this card, which is a super interesting one between Chidi Njokuani against Gregory Rodrigues. Bang Bang versus Robocop. Gotta be two of the best nicknames in the UFC. So if we take a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Chidi Njokuani is the favourite at average odds of around 1.80, which is minus 125 for an implied probability of 56%. If we take a look at the odds on Gregory Rodrigues, he is around an average of 2.05, which is going to be plus 105 for an implied probability of 49%. So both these guys in that even money odds range, both carrying an implied probability of around 50%. Bookies think this is a very difficult fight to call, and I agree with them. I do lean slightly towards Gregory Rodrigues in this matchup, but not with any amount of confidence. And what I'm going to do in this breakdown is basically talk you through I'm going to talk you through the reasons why I slightly lean towards Rodrigues, but I'm going to focus more on the reason why this is a very difficult fight to feel confident on either side. Fundamentally, it's a difficult fight to feel confident on either side because both guys have got big advantages over their opponent in areas their opponent is weak. There's things they can do to cause each other huge problems, and whenever you've got that dynamic, it's very difficult to feel confident either way, because ultimately we don't have a crystal ball, we can't predict the future, and we don't know which guy is going to do a better job of exploiting the other's major weaknesses. Past performances can give us some clues, but not with enough clarity and certainty to feel super confident on this one. So Chidi Njokuani is 33 years old, 6'3" with an 80-inch reach. Gregory Rodrigues is 30 years old, 6'3" with a 76-inch reach. So here we can see both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size. The difference obviously being Gregory Rodrigues is giving up a 4-inch reach advantage to Chidi. And this is pretty major. Chidi is a very high-level striker, very technical kickboxer. Like Sandhagen, knows how to use that length, knows how to use his reach. So even though statistically a 4-inch reach advantage in the middleweight division isn't huge, it can be for a guy like Njokuani that knows how to use it and really knows how to make that reach count. Someone like Njokuani that's so good at measuring distance. So let's first of all focus on the grappling, because this is one area where Rodrigues is going to have an absolutely enormous advantage over Chidi Njokuani. Njokuani has improved his takedown defense a bit over the last few years, but we all know that Njokuani's takedown defense and ground game has plagued him throughout his entire career. It was the same during his brother's run in the UFC, Anthony Njokuani. These guys just aren't very good on the ground. So if you come in against them with a grappling heavy game plan, you always stand a pretty good chance of causing them big problems. Now, we haven't seen that yet from Njokuani in his 2 fights in the UFC, because they've ended too quickly for either Todorovic or Barriault to test Njokuani's takedown defense and ground game. But if you go a little bit further back in Njokuani's career, you can see there are glaring weaknesses with his grappling. And I'm going to show you some of those weaknesses now. So at this point, the YouTube copyright algorithm may flag this video for showing a little bit of footage of Njokuani from one of his fights in Bellator. And as a result, I might have to re-upload this with like the video blacked out. So I do apologize if you can't see what I'm about to commentate on. But if you want the full uncensored video, it will be on my website, MMABettingTips.com. Now, I'm not infringing copyright here. This is fair use. I'm just providing, commentary as to one of Chidi Njokuani's past fights, and I'm sure that Bellator, Scott Coker, wouldn't have any problem with me doing this. But the YouTube copyright algorithm can be aggressive and can automatically flag videos sometimes. So what we are going to do here is take a look at Chidi Njokuani's fight against Rafael Carvalho from back in July 2019. Now, I know this fight was 3 years ago, and like I said, Njokuani has improved his takedown defense a bit since this matchup. But you've also got to remember, at this stage in Njokuani's career, in his early 30s, he's not going to be at that stage in his career after, almost 30 pro fights where he's going to be making rapid improvements, where he's going to be making big improvements. A fighter tends to improve a lot, in their 20s. When they hit their 30s, they start to plateau a little. So sure, Njokuani is improving, but whether he will have improved enough to neutralize the threat of grappling from someone like Rodrigues, based on what I'm about to show you, I mean, it's unlikely, but it can happen. It can happen. Like I say, grappling has been a huge issue for Njokuani throughout his entire career and his brother's career. So maybe he got his shit together, and before he came into the UFC, put a lot of effort into improving his takedown defense and ground game. So while watching this footage, I'm going to pick out a few weaknesses in Njokuani's skill set that make me lean towards Rodrigues in this one. The first being, you'll kind of see it here, and we certainly haven't seen it with how great he's looked in his UFC fights, but my big issue with Njokuani's striking over the years is that he's one of these passive, tentative fighters that doesn't really pull the trigger enough. If you go back and watch a lot of Njokuani's fights, even though he's got 2 quick knockouts in his UFC fights so far, you just get long periods of inactivity from him where he doesn't do a lot. And as a result, he's quite easy to outpoint, and he often loses rounds just by, not doing a lot, being very inactive. And you're kind of seeing that here. We're almost 1 minute into the first round, and he's barely done anything. He's barely thrown a strike. Now, I know it's going to take time to find your range. It's going to take you time to settle down and start to let your hands go. I do get that. However, if you watch a lot of Chidi Njokuani's fights, you'll see that he does a lot of nothing a lot of the time, and you'll see that as this fight progresses. Even into the third round, he just won't be doing very much on the feet. He's looked a lot more aggressive in the UFC though, so perhaps he has turned a corner. Now this is where my first issue starts with Njokuani. You can see that both guys have got into the clinch. Carvalho's driven him into the cage. So Carvalho drove him into the cage about 30 seconds ago. So he's been in this clinch position for about 30 seconds now, with Carvalho holding him against the cage. Now what we see is Njokuani not make that much effort to get his back off the cage. We can see here Carvalho easily puts him back against the cage again. And if we just scroll through this first round, Njokuani for the most part is just standing with his back against the cage, not making much of an effort to get his back off the cage. And he's been in a position like this for about 2 minutes now, just accepting being in the cage, allowing Carvalho to run the clock down and score points against him. Now Carvalho gets the body lock, drags Chidi to the ground. Chidi scrambles back up to his feet very quickly, very nice. But this would be Chidi's opportunity to get his back off the cage now and score some points. Let's see what happens. Remember what I said, Chidi is very passive, very tentative, doesn't pull the trigger very often. And again, you can see just not doing very much here. Just allowing Carvalho to outwork him, out-hustle him, dictate the pace. And Chidi's just not scoring. He's not doing anything. So we'll skip through a little bit more of the same. Eventually Carvalho drives Chidi back into the cage with about 1 minute and 20 left to go in round 1. And if we cycle through, you can see that for the remaining 1 minute and 20 seconds of round 1, Chidi does basically nothing, just allows Carvalho to hold him against the cage, and then eventually, right at the end of the round, gets taken down. Which is obviously bad, because at the business end of the round, the very end of the round, when you want to be finishing the round strong and influencing the judges, you don't want to be giving up cheap takedowns. So there was a lot to dislike about Chidi in that round. Didn't really do much on the feet. When he had opportunities to stand and strike and exercise his advantages when it came to striking, he didn't really do anything. He spent long periods of time with his back against the cage, not showing enough urgency to work his back off the cage. And then in the final 1 minute and 20 of the round, where you think, right, okay, you are losing this round because you haven't done a lot, but Carvalho hasn't done tons either. With 1 minute and 20 left to go, this is your opportunity to finish this round strong, do something big, influence the judges and steal this round for Carvalho. And what does Njokuani do? He stands there for 1 minute and 20 seconds against the cage doing absolutely nothing, gives up a weak takedown right at the end of the round. So into round 2 now. Chidi's had some time to warm up. You'd expect him to be a little bit more aggressive now, let his hands go a little bit more now that he's had time to settle into a rhythm, find his range. Although there haven't been too much of this fight on the feet, but you guys get what I'm saying. You'd expect Chidi to be a little bit more active now in this second round, especially as he just lost the first. You know, it's time to go for it, right? So you see Chidi start to throw some kicks here at the beginning of this round. We'll just cycle through. So we're about 1 minute in. Chidi's just chipping away at Carvalho with kicks now, and then eventually both guys get back to the clinch. This time Chidi looking for a takedown, but both guys about 1.5 minutes into the round just start battling for position in the clinch again. So we're 2 minutes in. It's a good round for Chidi so far, but then eventually Carvalho puts Chidi's back against the cage, and this is where, you know, this is a much better round for Chidi, but you start to see those weaknesses rear their ugly head again, where Chidi is just again accepting being against the cage, not showing much urgency to work his way through these positions. You can see here he's just standing here, he's not fighting for underhooks. You know, he's not showing any signs that he wants to work through this position. He's just kind of standing there, allowing Carvalho to hold him against the cage. And if we scroll through, you can see Carvalho eventually drops down for a takedown, gets in nice and deep on the legs of Chidi, connects his hands together, and you know this is a takedown waiting to happen. This shows Chidi's awful takedown defense. Here you can see that Carvalho's got in deep on the legs. He's got his hands connected together. It's only a matter of time before he commits to trying to yank Chidi's legs out from underneath him and complete this takedown. And yet Chidi is doing absolutely nothing to defend this takedown here. He's more focused on landing elbows to Carvalho than digging underhooks to try and stuff this takedown. So inevitably he does get taken down with 2 minutes left to go in the round, and then just immediately goes to close guard. You know, when you first hit the ground, before your opponent has an opportunity to establish dominant position, when there's a little bit of space for you as you hit the ground, that's your opportunity to try and scramble back up to your feet, to try and explode out of there before your opponent establishes that dominant position. It's not what Chidi did. Chidi just lied on his back, immediately went to close guard, and you can see him looking very, very weak off his back here. He gets lucky because the ref decides to stand him up, but you can see there, awful takedown defense from Chidi, and extremely weak off his back. Then final minute of the round, Chidi chips away at Carvalho with some kicks. We go into round 3 where we see more weaknesses from Njokuani. So 30 seconds into the round, Carvalho drives Chidi into the cage. And again, more of the same. He's been there for 30 seconds now, hasn't made much of an effort to get back up to his feet. Carvalho drops down for another takedown. Again, no effort from Chidi to defend the takedown. Doesn't try and dig underhooks, just doesn't do anything, just allows Carvalho to yank his legs out from underneath him. Look at him, he's literally doing nothing. Like, why aren't you fighting for underhooks here? Inevitably gets taken down. Awful takedown defense. Again, goes to close guard. And this time, with 3 minutes 30 seconds left to go in the round, Carvalho just stays on top, chipping away at him. So he's been on his back for a full minute now, has done virtually nothing. He's been on his back now for 2 minutes, has done virtually nothing, made no effort to get back up, despite the fact he's very close to the cage. He could try to be looking to get his back tight to the cage and wall walk. He's been on his back for over 2 minutes, has made no attempt to get back up to his feet. Eventually does late on in the round, but it's too late and the fight's over. So I just wanted to skim through that video there because it kind of highlights all of Chidi's weaknesses in one video. And you haven't seen those weaknesses from him in his first 2 fights in the UFC because he's been able to get finishes very quickly. It's possible he could have improved a lot since that fight back in 2019. But it's difficult for us to say because obviously he hasn't fought a strong grappler since Carvalho, who may be able to test his weaknesses on the ground, or exploit his weaknesses on the ground, I should say. Gregory Rodrigues can. Rodrigues is a big, strong, physically imposing middleweight. He's a good offensive wrestler, good MMA grappler, decent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and if Rodrigues comes into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, just like we said with Sandhagen, based on past performances, this should be an easy night's work for Rodrigues. He's got a heavy top game, decent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and the way that he shoots in nice and deep on his opponent's hips when shooting takedowns, he should be able to get Njokuani to the ground no problem. Now the problem with Rodrigues is that, just like Sandhagen, Rodrigues is quite stubborn, often lets his ego get in the way of him, and doesn't use enough grappling in fights where he really should. So if you look at his record, in many ways there are a lot of similarities with this fight against Njokuani as there were with Rodrigues' fight against Armen Petrosian, because Petrosian is another guy with bad takedown defense and a very low level ground game, and yet Rodrigues just didn't use that much grappling in that fight. Had Rodrigues gone into that fight against Petrosian with a grappling heavy game plan, he would have won easily. He would have just taken Petrosian down, controlled him on the ground, dominated the fight. But instead, Rodrigues let his ego get the better of him and tried to win a stand-up fight instead against a superior striker in Petrosian. Ended up losing a close split decision. So the question now becomes, with Rodrigues losing that fight to Petrosian because he didn't use enough grappling, will he learn from his mistakes? Will he go back, watch that Petrosian fight and be like, damn, I fucked up, I should have used more grappling and I would have won that fight? Or is he one of these guys that is stubborn, doesn't learn from his mistakes, lets the ego get the better of him, and he's going to come out here against Njokuani and make the same mistake and try and beat a superior kickboxer in a stand-up fight? That's why this fight is very complex, because we don't know the answer to that question. We know, based on what I've shown you, that if Rodrigues comes in with a grappling heavy game plan, this fight will be an absolute fucking cakewalk for him. But we also know that he's been in this situation in the past and he hasn't used enough grappling. So answers on a postcard. Please let me know if you've got a crystal ball as to the game plan strategy Rodrigues will use this weekend. It's difficult to say, and that's why this fight is a very difficult one to predict. Leave a comment below and let me know how you see this one going. I guess one other issue I've got with Rodrigues is he isn't really a persistent grappler. So Rodrigues is one of these guys that will shoot a takedown, and then if you stuff it, or if he does take you down, you quickly pop back up to your feet. You won't usually see him shoot another takedown for like another 3 or 4 minutes, which is a huge red flag, because obviously optimum MMA grappling involves persistent grappling, being relentless, you know, shooting a high volume of takedowns, and if you don't get them, you know, still chain wrestling against the cage to wear your opponent down and you know, overwhelm them with techniques in the hope that they will give something up. Rodrigues isn't like that. He's very much a single shot wrestler where he'll shoot a single takedown attempt. If you deal with it, he'll abandon it. But there's no doubt he has a huge advantage over Njokuani on the ground. He comes into the fight with a grappling heavy game plan. Rodrigues is more than likely going to be the guy that gets his hand raised. But if the fight stays standing, could get very dicey for Rodrigues, because we know Njokuani, very high level kickboxer. You've seen in his fight against Carvalho, amazing kicks, technical, moves well, good defensively, fights long, reads his opponent. He's very, very good. Rodrigues, on the other hand, is one of these big, clunky, slow middleweights. He's flat-footed, he's heavy, doesn't move particularly well, he's quite slow to react, not the best defensively. Njokuani's an absolute sniper with a big speed advantage over Rodrigues, and he can cause Rodrigues big problems on the feet. But ultimately, when it's all said and done, if I'm trying to look at this fight and work out who is more likely to win, who has more path to victory, there's no doubt that's Gregory Rodrigues, because Rodrigues is a far better grappler. How am I going to word this? What I mean to say is, Rodrigues is a far better striker. Rodrigues is a far better striker than Njokuani is a grappler. And what I mean by that is, if this fight goes to the ground, there is no debate, there is no argument, there is no dispute that Rodrigues has an enormous advantage on the ground. That is clear for all to see. If you've got eyeballs, you have to have that opinion. If the fight stays standing, there's no doubt that Njokuani does have an advantage over Rodrigues, but I do think Rodrigues can hold his own. I don't think Njokuani's advantages over Rodrigues on the feet are anywhere near as extreme as Rodrigues' advantages on the ground. Because there are issues with Njokuani striking. I've already said at times he's very tentative and very passive and doesn't put his stamp on rounds and lets rounds slip away from him through bad fight IQ and inactivity. Perhaps he isn't like that anymore. Perhaps he's a lot more aggressive now. But he wasn't back in his Bellator days. And old habits die hard. Once there are how do I word this? I don't want to say mental weaknesses, but once you see a fighter demonstrate these kind of weaknesses, these flashes of bad fight IQ, they're often there forever. Very, very rare a fighter, particularly deep into his career like Njokuani, it's very rare they bury those weaknesses with fight IQ forever. So maybe they rear their ugly head this weekend, which gives Rodrigues a chance on the feet. You know, he's not as good of a striker as Njokuani, but maybe bad fight IQ gets Njokuani into trouble here. So my lean is Rodrigues, not with any amount of confidence. Don't feel confident in this at all, because he doesn't grapple enough, and in a stand-up fight he probably loses. But for all the reasons I've described in this breakdown, I think out of the two, with them both being in the even money odds range, with them both giving you the same sort of payout, I think Rodrigues is going to give you the better risk to reward ratio if you really want to bet this fight. I won't be betting him, but I do think he is the better side to be on. So I hope you found that useful. Hit the like button below if you did. Now let's get into the next fight, another very, very complex fight. This is such an interesting card. This time we're going to be breaking down the fight between Fili and Bill Algeo. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see it's another matchup in that even money odds range. Fili has average odds of around 1.80, which is going to be minus 125 for an implied probability of 56%. We take a look at the odds on Bill Algeo. He is around an average of 2.05, which is going to be plus 105 for an implied probability of 49%. So Fili is 32 years old, 5'11" with a 74-inch reach. Bill Algeo, 33 years old, 6 foot tall, with a 73.5-inch reach. So both guys pretty much the same age, pretty much the same size. I guess what's funny about this one is Algeo is being seen as this like young, hungry, up-and-coming bull with shiny new face in the featherweight division. Fili's been around forever. He's seen as the established veteran, but Algeo is actually older than Fili, which is quite interesting. Now, the only real thing to mention in terms of the tail of the tape is that at 33 years old and 32 years old for Fili respectively, these two guys are starting to get old for featherweights. Now, not like crazy old or anything like that. You know, featherweights don't tend to start declining until they're like 34, 35 years old. But at 32 and 33 respectively, I wouldn't expect either Fili or Algeo to show up and make big improvements compared to, you know, what we've seen from them in the past. They're more likely to have plateaued and look pretty similar to how they have in recent matchups. So I don't think unpredictable improvements are that likely coming in this weekend. The other X factor that I want to talk about on this one, though, is that both these guys are on very different career trajectories at the moment. And like I say, when it comes to fighting, there's so much that you have to think about in order to determine who has got the best chance of winning this or winning any fight. Because straight off the bat, Fili, in my opinion, is significantly better than Bill Algeo in every single aspect of MMA. Fili is not just a little bit better than Algeo everywhere, he's a lot better than Algeo everywhere. The skill gap in this fight is massive. Fili is a much better striker than Algeo, and he's also a much better grappler. But if betting on MMA and making money from betting on MMA was as simple as identifying who is the more skilled fighter, then we would all be millionaires, because that's a very easy thing to do. I can watch footage of any two guys, and 99.9% of the time I can tell you who the more skilled fighter is. It's not a difficult thing to do. We've all got eyes. Like, the camera doesn't lie. But so much more goes into it. So much more goes into who gets their hand raised at the end of the night. The most important things for us to focus on a lot of the time are who has the best game plan, who has the best strategy, who's more motivated, who's hungrier, who's got that fire in the belly, who's got that will to win. And while Fili is significantly better than Bill Algeo in every single aspect of MMA, Algeo has an abundance of advantages in all those other things that we were talking about, which makes this a very interesting matchup. Because while Fili is superior in terms of skills, he's very much lacking in the fire, the desire to win. You know, that dogged determination that we've seen from Algeo in many of his recent fights. I think Fili is a guy that in many ways has perhaps lost his way a little bit in MMA. Fili was one of these guys who was rising quickly in the featherweight division. He was working his way towards a title shot. And I've always been very high on Fili. He's one of the few guys in the division that is very good everywhere. Doesn't really have any major weaknesses. He's got a good chin. He's tough as nails. His gas tank is great. Trains at a top gym. His grappling's decent. His striking's decent. When you look at Fili, when you research him, when you break him down, there really aren't that many weaknesses that you can pick out that potential opponents can exploit. That's why Fili is so good. But I think after racking up, a few pretty bad losses in a short space of time, losing to other rising contenders in the featherweight division like Sadiq Yusuff and Bryce Mitchell, I think somewhere along the line, Fili lost his way and lost motivation. He probably came to the realization that when he's, lost to guys like Bryce Mitchell, lost to guys like Sadiq Yusuff, at the age of 32, he's probably never going to be a UFC champion. He's probably never going to achieve his goals. And we've seen a flip in focus from Fili where, if you go back 3-4 years, all you'll see on Fili's Instagram profile is pictures and videos of him training hard at Team Alpha Male with some of the best fighters in the world. You think about some of the absolute sharks that have helped develop Fili over the years. Guys like TJ Dillashaw, Chad Mendes, Uriah Faber. I mean, how good did Cody Garbrandt used to be? Think of how good the Garbrandt was that beat Dominic Cruz. You've got guys like Danny Castillo and Darren Elkins. All these guys that were at Team Alpha Male, and iron sharpens iron. And Fili, at one point in his career, looked fantastic. But now, when you go on his Instagram profile, he's posting pictures and videos about his band. He's in a rock band. You see him posting pictures about his clothing line, posting pictures and videos about his attempt at stand-up comedy. And you see very, very little pictures and videos of his training, which has kind of come at the same time that he isn't performing as well as he used to. Inconsistency has crept into his performances. Fili used to be one of these guys that was ruthlessly consistent. Win or lose, that he would show up, fight his ass off, and you'd always get the very best out of Andre Fili. His performance against Bryce Mitchell showed that that's not the case anymore. No disrespect to Bryce Mitchell, he's a brilliant fighter. But Andre Fili is capable of so much more than what he showed against Bryce Mitchell that night. He made life extremely easy for Bryce Mitchell. Don't want to take anything away from Mitchell, but we often see fighters fail to show up and perform to their full potential, and that was one of the biggest flake jobs I've ever seen. Fili's head wasn't in the game that night. He made mistakes and did things that I'd never seen Fili do in the previous 15 fights. So for whatever reason, inconsistency has crept into Fili's game, possibly due to a lack of motivation, a lack of fire. Perhaps at the age of 32, he's starting to think about life outside of fighting, which I love. It's smart. It's the right thing to do, which is why he's working on stand-up comedy, his band and his clothing line. He needs to do that for his own survival. UFC fighters don't make much money, but unfortunately, that is going to detract from his performances in the octagon, because you guys know, to reach that elite level at anything in life, you've got to be all in. You can't be a part-time fighter. If you want to be, a stand-up comedian, you've got to go all in, dedicate all your time, all your energy, and all your focus to that. Because if you don't, you're going to get outworked by all the guys that are. And so perhaps Fili is just spreading himself too thin at the moment with all these different projects he's got, which is detracting from his training, and maybe just hasn't got the same motivation that he used to have. Bill Algeo is the complete opposite, because he's an absolute dog. If you look at his last fight against Herbert Burns, Algeo's takedown offense and ground game is not good. We've also already said that Andre Fili's takedown offense, his ground game, his grappling is a lot better than Algeo's. And you're not going to find anyone on planet Earth with eyeballs that would say Algeo's grappling is better than Herbert Burns'. Herbert Burns is a far better grappler than Bill Algeo. But Algeo beat Herbert Burns by breaking him, by being the tougher, more determined, more dogged fighter. Algeo is, he's not young for 33, but he's young in his UFC career. He's had a lot less UFC fights than Andre Fili. And Algeo is just one of these guys that you have to practically kill in order to beat. He's tough, he's gritty, he's determined, he's ruthlessly consistent. He always fights up and performs his full potential. And he's got a tremendous will to win. He's motivated. He's got that fire. Same can't be said about Fili. So this is a really interesting matchup because Fili is better than Algeo standing up and on the ground. But does he have that same determination and will to win? And Algeo's determination and will to win can close the skill gap considerably and make this a very interesting fight. So as I break the rest of this down, or as I break this fight down, I want to be talking a lot about how both guys match up from a technical point of view. But what that doesn't account for is the fact that Algeo has the fire and the will to win, and Fili might not anymore. And so, how these guys match up from a technical point of view might not matter, because it certainly didn't matter in Algeo's last fight against Burns. So in terms of grappling, Fili has a big advantage here. Fili is a good offensive wrestler, has a heavy top game, is a good technical grappler with good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which you'd expect. He's trained at a very high level, predominantly grappling-based gym for pretty much his entire career. He's been training at Team Alpha Male for like 10 years. You'd expect Andre Fili to be very good on the ground. Algeo, we know, has that sideways karate style of striking, kind of, similar to Stephen Thompson, not as good obviously, but similar sort of style of striking. Algeo is not a grappler. His takedown offense is bad. He's quite low level on the ground. That's an area Fili's got a big edge, but it doesn't matter if Algeo's got a bigger will to win, and he's going to try and out hustle Fili on the ground. But technically, Fili is a lot better than Algeo there. Standing up, Fili is also a much better striker than Bill Algeo. Algeo looks good when he's in that sideways karate stance, light on his feet, bouncing in and out, hands down low, chin up high, chipping away at his opponents with these, sport karate combinations. But Algeo just doesn't read his opponents particularly well, and because he fights with his hands down low, chin up high, striking defense is very, very bad. Fili is a phenomenal boxer. Good defense, good combinations, brilliant jab, fight-ending head kicks. He moves very well. He's very technical. He's an absolute dog. He's a really good fucking striker. You've got to be a good striker to beat a guy like Charles Jourdain. Fili is a good striker. Much more sound fundamentally. Fili might not look as flashy as Algeo, but he's a hell of a lot harder to hit and just way more refined, way more technical. Fili by far the better striker. And another area where Fili has a huge advantage over Algeo in this matchup is the fact that Fili's gas tank has always been on point. Fili has a really good gas tank. Fili can go hard for 3 rounds, no problem. Whereas Algeo always looks very bad in round 3. He slows down a lot as fights wear on. He gets tired and sloppy towards the end of round 2. So if you want to see what I'm talking about, I strongly recommend, if you're thinking of betting this fight, you go do your own research. Go take a look at some of Algeo's fights that have gone the distance. Take a look at him against Brito, Ramos, Carlisle, Lamas. Anyone, take your pick. Go take a look at Algeo in round 3 of his fights. You'll see him look tired, sloppy, and gassed. You'll never see that from Andre Fili. Fili's got a really good gas tank. So, if I'm capping the probability of Fili winning round 3 in this fight, I'm probably saying Fili's winning the 3rd round of this matchup 70 to 80% of the time, because how good his gas tank is even at his worst, and how bad Algeo's gas tank is even at his best. So, as I approach this fight from a betting point of view, I've got to lean Fili, because in my opinion, he's got a better gas tank, he's got a good chin, he's tough as nails, he's got the advantage standing up and on the ground. He does lack that critical success factor of perhaps not having the same fire in his belly, the same motivation that Algeo has. But the reason why I lean towards Fili in this matchup is because with Algeo's bad gas tank, very confident if this fight goes deep, film for error in the 1st and 2nd round. If Algeo gets flash knocked down or lets a round slip away from him, it's going to be very, very difficult for him to win a decision, because we can pretty much bank on Fili winning the 3rd round a high percentage of the time, which means Fili only has to nick one of the first 2 rounds in order to win a decision here. So it becomes a very difficult fight for Algeo to win in that respect. But I do question Fili's motivation and hunger at this stage in his career, and as a result, you know, very risky to bet this fight. But I do lean Fili. I think Fili will get it done this weekend. I'm probably going to be betting a little on Fili. Not a super confident bet by any means. Algeo's an absolute dog, but I think Fili has enough advantages in this matchup for me to roll the dice on him perhaps one last time. And if he loses this weekend, I am probably going to consign myself to the fact that Fili is possibly on a bit of a decline, because with his range of skills and his advantages in this matchup, he should be beating guys like Algeo pretty comfortably. But maybe this weekend we'll see the first absolute confirmation of a decline in Andre Fili. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, let's break down the next fight between Amedovski and Joseph Pyfer. Now, we've already broken down 3 really complex, really interesting matchups. It's time for us to ease up a little bit, because this fight is completely dead from a betting point of view. I don't have a lot to talk about when it comes to this matchup, which is a change, because I usually have fucking too much to say about every fight, right? I ramble on for way too long. But I know you guys, you watch my videos, you like the details. That's why you're here. The devil is in the detail, right? The devil is in the detail. Paying attention to the close details is often the difference between winning or losing, which is why it takes so much work and so much time to be profitable betting on MMA. You know, that's what gives us the edge. That's what makes us different. That's what has enabled me to have such a successful career, particularly live betting on UFC. So yeah, man, I know you guys, you know, hopefully the majority of you guys appreciate the level of depth we go into. But we're not going to be able to go into that much depth on this fight, because there are certain big unanswered questions with Amedovski, which makes it difficult to predict how this one's likely to go. So we'll start off by taking a look at the odds. We can see that Pyfer is a pretty big favourite at average odds of around 1.22, which is going to be minus 454 for an minus 455, sorry, for an implied probability of 82%. If we take a look at the odds on Amedovski, he's around an average of 4.50, which is going to be plus 350 for an implied probability of 22%. So Amedovski is 34 years old, 5'10" with a 74-inch reach, and Pyfer is 25 years old, 6'2" with a 75-inch reach. So we can see that Amedovski is 9 years older than Pyfer, and we know that statistically the younger fighter wins around 67% of the time when there's a 9-year age gap in a fight, which gives Pyfer a pretty big statistical advantage in this matchup. We can also see that Pyfer is quite a bit taller than Amedovski as well, which can't be a bad thing. So the reason why this is such a difficult fight to predict is because we really don't know a lot about Alan Amedovski. If you look at his record, we can see that dating back to April 2019, so over the last 3 years, he's only spent about 1 minute and 20 seconds in the octagon. His his second fight in the UFC ended in 14 seconds. His most recent fight ended in 1 minute 4 seconds. So neither of those fights tell us anything about Amedovski at all. He got flash KO'd. There's not a lot we can learn from them. So the last time we got a really good look at Amedovski was 3 years ago, over 3 years ago now, all the way back in his debut against Krzysztof Jotko. And even though that fight went the distance, that matchup also doesn't tell us a lot about him, because Jotko basically took him down and laid on him for 3 rounds. Now, of course, that fight showed that Amedovski has bad takedown defense. He's weak off his back. He has a low-level ground game. You know, we got confirmation of that. But aside from that, we don't know a great deal about his striking, his cardio, or where his grappling is at in 2022, because obviously this fight was a really long time ago, and Amedovski may have made big improvements since he fought Krzysztof Jotko. And before that, his fights don't really tell us much, because he faced either a really low level of opponent, or again, the fights ended very, very quickly, as you can see. So for me, Amedovski is a complete unknown coming in this weekend. It would be very dangerous to kind of assess Amedovski's strengths and weaknesses based on a fight that took place so long ago. He could be a lot better than he looked back in 2019 against Jotko. So I don't really know what to expect from Amedovski this weekend. I'm keeping a pretty open mind on him. Obviously, he hasn't looked great in the past, but fighters are on a continuous journey of self-improvement. And with Pyfer being such a big favourite, there's very little upside in betting a guy in this odds range in MMA. So for me, I'm keeping a very open mind on what Amedovski may be capable of. Now, even though we don't really know where Amedovski's at this stage in his career, we do have a good idea of where Pyfer is at. There's a decent amount of footage available on Pyfer, so we know a fair bit about him. He's a pretty strong grappler, good offensive wrestler, great grappling control, which straight away makes this a potentially very difficult fight for Amedovski, because if Amedovski hasn't improved his takedown defense and ground game that much since he made his debut against Njokuani, well, Pyfer can take him down and put on an absolute grappling clinic here, because Pyfer is decent on the ground, and I'm guessing that's why Pyfer's a big favourite here. Ultimately, Amedovski's past fights show that he's a low-level grappler. Pyfer's recent fights show he's a strong grappler, therefore it makes sense that Pyfer is a big favourite, although the odds aren't possibly accounting for improvements in Amedovski we may see, because he hasn't fought in so fucking long. In terms of grappling, Pyfer is quite flat-footed, quite stiff to be honest with you, quite easy to hit, but he is one of these guys that appears to have abnormal, crazy power in his hands. He's got like a real heaviness and flatness and weight to everything that he does, but that's probably the reason why he hits so hard. So he's got big knockout power on the feet, which also doesn't bode well for Amedovski, with the fact that Amedovski has been knocked out in his last two. So look, based on past performances, I completely get why Pyfer's a big favourite here. You know, he's dangerous on the feet, very, very strong grappler, but obviously I am just not interested in this fight from a betting point of view, because he's a big favourite, and who knows how much Amedovski may have improved in 2019. So a bit of a dead fight for betting, but I hope you found that useful. Now, let's go into a much more interesting fight from a betting point of view. Rodrigues Nascimento against Tanner Boser. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Tanner Boser is the favourite at average odds of around, there's quite a big odds spread on this one. We will say about 1.59, which would be minus 169 for an implied probability of 63%. If we take a look at the odds on Rodrigues Nascimento, he's around an average of, say, 2.45, which would be plus 145 for an implied probability of 41%. So if we look at the odds movement chart on this matchup, we can see that the odds on Nascimento have been steadily declining. It seems like a lot of people since the beginning of this week have felt like the odds are off on this matchup, and as a result have been betting on Nascimento, and I completely agree with them. I am betting Nascimento this weekend as well. I don't know why Boser is a relatively big favourite in this matchup. I understand that he's probably more likely to win, but remember, the key to making money betting on MMA is not about betting on who is more likely to win, it's about who gives you the better risk to reward ratio. And if I was capping this fight, I'd have these odds way closer to even money, because Tanner Boser has got one giant weakness in his skill set that Nascimento has got a reasonably good chance of exploiting. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But yeah, I'll be betting Nascimento this weekend. I'm not that confident in him because there's a lot of issues with Nascimento, but I do think the odds are off here. And by the way the odds have moved, I'm not the only one. Seems like a lot of people agree with me on this, and a lot of people have bet Nascimento's odds down from, like, you know, 2.71 plus 171 down to 2.46 plus 146, which is quite a decent sized move. And you know, with red arrows pointing down across the board on Nascimento's odds, I'm guessing Nascimento's odds will continue to decline. Obviously, videos like this will probably accelerate the rate at which his odds decline, because, I mean, you know, we do have a bit of an influence on the odds. So let's take a look. Where do we begin with this one? Let's start with the tail of the tape. So Nascimento is 29 years old, 6'2", with an 80-inch reach, and Tanner Boser is 31 years old, 6'2", with an 85-inch reach. So that's where the advantages begin for Nascimento. These guys are roughly the same age, roughly the same size, but you can see that Nascimento has a nice 5-inch reach advantage over Boser, which is a decent size, decent reach advantage. It does give Nascimento an edge in this fight. He does have a predominantly boxing-based style of striking. Boser much more of a kicker. So having that 5-inch reach advantage is going to help him here, because Boser's not a particularly good boxer. His strength is in his kicks. But the real area of weakness for Boser. The real area where Nascimento is going to have a huge advantage over Boser is on the ground. We've seen in the past Boser's takedown offense and ground game is an absolute joke. I really want to make it... What I'm really conscious of when I do these breakdown videos is that for some crazy reason, a decent percentage of people that watch these videos often don't take my word for the information that I'm sharing with you. And what I'm trying to explain to you guys in these videos is that ultimately all I'm doing is watching a fuck ton of footage on these guys, and then in these videos I'm relaying to you what I've seen. So sure, everyone can see things differently, but I am one of the very few people on earth with a very long track record of making money betting on MMA, right? I make a profit live betting MMA almost every month, ever. I know what I'm looking at. I know what I'm talking about. So it's kind of frustrating at times where I'm talking about these things and I can't show you. I really want to show you things. I wish I could show you guys more footage, but it's very difficult to do. Obviously, videos get taken down if you show footage of UFC fights. But in this instance, I think that the bookies have made such a glaring mistake of overlooking such a huge weakness in a fighter that they haven't factored into the odds, that I do just really want to show you some footage on Boser, man. And I'm going to try. So again, just like earlier on with the Chidi Njokuani Gregory Rodrigues fight, it is very possible that this video may now get flagged for copyright infringement, and if it does, I'll have to re-upload it with the video footage blacked out. So if you want the unedited version, go to my website, MMABettingTips.com, link in the description below. But I'm going to show you a little bit of footage now of Tanner Boser, which, aside from everything else that I'm going to talk about in this breakdown video, will perfectly illustrate to you why there is value on Rodrigo Nascimento this weekend, irrespective of whether he wins or loses. So I'm going to bring it in now, and again, I'm not infringing copyright under fair use copyright law. I should be able to provide you with commentary on this, but obviously the YouTube copyright algorithm automatically flags videos, and it can be pretty aggressive at taking videos down at times. So I'm just going to play you this video now. We'll keep it nice and small for the sake of trying to not get this video flagged. And what I'm going to do is just flick through again, just providing commentary. There's only a small piece of this footage that I want to show you. So this is from Tanner Boser's fight against Ilir Latifi back in June 2021. So it wasn't that long ago. He's only had a year to improve since this fight, and obviously he has only had one fight since this matchup. Now watch this. Where is it? Here we go. Let's take a look at this. So we're about a minute and a half into round one, and you can see Ilir Latifi grabs a hold of this single leg after Boser throws a kick. And you can see here, Boser doesn't even try and stuff this takedown, doesn't try and clear his leg. Doesn't try to hop over to the cage to get his back tight to the cage where he can start to work to defend the takedown. This guy, if we slow this down into slow motion, he practically leaps to the ground. Look at this. Watch. Here, he should be trying to push down on the head of Ilir Latifi and free this right leg. But instead, he just kind of leaps to the ground. Very, very strange. Just leaps to the ground. Made no effort to dig underhooks. No effort to push down on the head of Ilir Latifi and free that left leg. So here you can see the Boser's been taken down a minute and a half into this round. And then if we hit play again, he just, similar to Chidi Njokuani, just lies on his back doing absolutely nothing. Just lies on his back doing absolutely nothing for 2 whole minutes. Just allows Latifi to hold him down, and then eventually gets to his knees and stands back up, and then just spends the rest of the round chipping away at Latifi. But there you can see pretty bad takedown defense from Boser, and incredibly weak off his back. He's the kind of guy that if you put him on his back, he will show very, very little effort in working his way back up to his feet. So this is round 2 now. There's not a whole lot of grappling in round 2. Latifi gets outstruck and loses this second round, so we'll skip ahead to round 3, where you will see this weakness present itself once again. So here we go. This is round 3. And you can see just over 40 seconds into round 3, Latifi shoots a takedown, grabs a hold of a single leg, and he just turns the corner and easily flattens Boser out. Just under 1 minute into the 3rd round. And then again, you can see Boser just lies on his back in the closed guard position. He's been on his back for about a whole minute now, made no effort to get back up. He's been on his back for 2 minutes now, no effort to get back up. He's been on his back for 3 minutes now, no effort to get back up. And spends the rest of the round on his back doing absolutely nothing. So he got taken down basically 1 minute into round 3 and then just laid on his back for 4 minutes doing absolutely nothing. Zero, zilch, nada. Now, it doesn't matter who you think is going to win this fight this weekend. It doesn't matter if you're the biggest Tanner Boser fan ever or you think Nascimento is going to crush him. I don't see how a guy like Boser, with a weakness that big in his skill set, is this big of a favourite over another competent, well-rounded mixed martial artist. I don't see how Boser is this big of a favourite against any fighter that has ever shown any inclination to grapple, ever. Because I'm not saying Nascimento is a particularly good grappler. Is Nascimento as good of a grappler as Ilir Latifi? Absolutely fucking not. He isn't. But if you watch a guy like Boser, you study a guy like Boser, it doesn't take a fucking rocket scientist to work out what you need to do to beat this guy. And so, when you look at Rodrigo Nascimento, he trains at, in my opinion, the best MMA gym in the world. Trains at American Top Team in Boca Raton, Florida. He's got world-class coaches around him that are going to prepare him for this fight and develop a specific game plan and strategy that is tailored towards giving him the best chance of beating Tanner Boser. Now, if you're Rodrigo Nascimento's coach and you've spent a couple of hours looking at Tanner Boser's past fights, what are you going to tell Nascimento to do? What do you think Nascimento's game plan and strategy is going to be this weekend? It's got to involve grappling. And based on what we've just seen, I think Nascimento is going to have a lot of success with his grappling. Like I say, he's not the best offensive wrestler. He isn't. But when you have takedown defense and a ground game as bad as Tanner Boser's, you don't need to be a particularly good grappler to exploit that weakness. And so if Rodrigo Nascimento comes into this fight this weekend with a grappling heavy game plan, he could do very, very, very well here. And so for me, with how big that weakness is in Tanner Boser's skill set, the odds on this should be far closer to even money. And I think Nascimento at underdog odds this weekend gives you a really good risk to reward ratio. Again, I'm not saying he's going to win. I'm not saying he's that likely to win. I'm not saying I feel confident in Nascimento. All I'm saying is the odds are off on this one. And there's definite value on Nascimento. And it looks like I'm not the only one that feels this way, because his odds have been gradually declining all week. And they continue to decline. So if Rodrigo comes in this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, unless Boser's improved his takedown defense a lot, which he could do, it is possible. He's very young for a heavyweight. But if he hasn't, he's going to be in a lot of trouble here. So in terms of how these two guys match up when it comes to striking, Boser does have an edge on the feet. There's no doubt about it. And both guys have got very different styles of striking. Boser's got a good gas tank, good footwork, good movement, and a very good kicking game. He does a really good job at chipping away at his opponents with a high volume of leg kicks. His boxing's not the best, to be honest with you. He's not the most dangerous striker. He's more of a volume guy. But Boser's biggest strength is the fact that he can fight at a high pace and he has a good gas tank in a division full of guys that can't fight at a high pace and don't have particularly good gas tanks. Now, Nascimento's gas tank doesn't look terrible, but he's a big, slow, clunky heavyweight that's not going to be able to keep up with the pace that Boser sets. Boser's going to have a big speed advantage here, so Boser will have an advantage on the feet. He's likely going to be able to outstrike Nascimento. However, Boser does have a kicks-based style of striking. His boxing's not the best. Nascimento hits hard. He's a big, powerful heavyweight, and he probably is the better boxer than Boser, even if he's not going to be able to match Boser's volume. So I hope you found that breakdown useful, and hopefully YouTube didn't didn't make me re-upload this video and black out that footage. Like I say, if they did, go check out my website, mmabettingtips.com, where you'll find an uncensored version. Like I say, I'm not infringing copyright, it's all fair use, but I wish I could show you guys more footage to kind of back up the points that I make in these breakdown videos. Now, let's talk about the final fight that I want to cover in this breakdown video, which is going to be Anthony Hernandez against Marc-Andre Barriault. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Anthony Hernandez is the favourite at average odds of around 1.57, which is going to be minus 175 for an implied probability of 64%. If we take a look at the odds on his opponent, Mr. Barriault, he is around an average of, say, 2.50, which is going to be plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%. So Anthony Hernandez is 28 years old, 6 foot tall with a 75-inch reach, and Barriault, 32 years old, 6 foot 1 with a 73-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size, no real notable X factors for us to talk about. So let's consider how both these guys match up when it comes to striking and grappling. So if we start off with grappling, from a technical point of view, Hernandez is a far better grappler than Marc-Andre Barriault. Better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, better wrestling, he's very scrambly on the ground, he's got a decent top game, good grappling control. Hernandez is a decent grappler. The grappling is probably Barriault's biggest weakness. His takedown offense isn't great. He's not great on the ground, but what I would say about Barriault is that he's difficult to hold down. He's one of these guys that gives up a lot of takedowns because his takedown defense isn't very good, but unlike Chidi Njokuani, he shows a lot of urgency in working out of bad positions. So if you take him down, hold him against the cage, put him in a bad position on the ground, very quickly he will fight to work through it. So even though Hernandez has got a huge advantage on the ground, I'm not sure how much success he's going to have with it, because Barriault may not enable Hernandez to rack up much control time or rack up many points, simply because he's a difficult guy to control. Now on the feet, this is a really interesting matchup because Hernandez's footwork, his movement, his striking offense is a lot better than Barriault's. Barriault's style involves being very flat-footed, very clunky, and just kind of plodding forward, chipping away at his opponents, trying to break them down and wear them down with his pressure. But he's not the best defensively, so he often takes a lot of damage. Doesn't have much power in his hands either, and he's not that fast. So he often kind of chips away at his opponents with a decent volume, but doesn't really do much damage and fails to put his stamp on rounds because he just doesn't have a very imposing, damaging, impactful style of fighting. And that's the reason why, you know, if you look at his record, he's lost so many decisions, because even though he's skilled enough to hang in there with pretty much everyone that he fights, he often struggles to put his stamp on rounds just because he's a very meat and potatoes fighter, very average. Just there's nothing special or dynamic to his game. He's not that dangerous, not that powerful, not that flashy. Just a very blue-collar, industrious fighter. Hernandez, on the other hand, can inflict a lot more damage with his strikes. His movement is better. His diversity of attacks is better. He lands more impactful strikes, does more damage. But Hernandez's issue in the past has been that he does slow down a bit as fights wear on, whereas Barriault is a cardio machine. So the way that I see these two match up is that Hernandez is a bit better than Barriault everywhere, and so Hernandez is likely to do really well early on. But Barriault is a tough dude, difficult to cause problems standing up and on the ground because he's an absolute dog, pretty good defensively, and he's very good at just hanging in there and continuing to force you to work. So the way I see this fight is Hernandez is going to be able to use his superior technique to perform very well early on, but then Barriault will likely take over late on in the fight as Hernandez starts to slow. So the question here is whether Hernandez is going to have enough gas in the tank to win the first 2 rounds before he starts to slow down, or whether we'll see a momentum swing come in round 2 where Barriault will kind of take over towards the end of round 2, nick the second round, and then most likely win the 3rd round. Difficult to say. Now, if Hernandez shows up with a good enough gas tank to go hard for 3 rounds, I think he wins this fight very comfortably because he's a better striker and better grappler than Barriault. However, I do think Barriault could wear him down just by hanging in there with Hernandez and making him work in all positions. So interesting fight for betting. I'm not going to be betting this one myself just because I you know, I think the odds are probably where they should be on this one. This is a great card for betting. Obviously, I've got loads more breakdowns for all the prelim fights on my website, MMABettingTips.com. Go to my website, check them out if you're interested in watching more of these breakdown videos for more fights. But this is one of those fights where I look at it and I'm like, yeah, the odds are probably where they should be. Hernandez, you know, moderate favourite. I get that. You know, he is a bit better than Barriault everywhere, but could run into a little bit of trouble late on. You know, because Barriault is one of these guys who's good at wearing guys down. Because of that, I wouldn't bet Hernandez as a moderate favourite. But because he is a bit better than Barriault everywhere, I'm not interested in taking Barriault as an underdog, a slight underdog, because I don't think Barriault has any major advantages everywhere, anywhere, other than being tough, gritty, determined, having a decent gas tank. And that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my website, MMABettingTips.com. On there, you'll find breakdown videos for all prelim fights. You can join my live betting group. You can chat to me every day in the VIP chat room. You can also see my bets for every single UFC event. Over-unders, which we perform extremely well on. Even money bets, money line bets, prop bets, live bets, everything. They're all on there, so check it out. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great week. I hope you crush it this weekend and make loads of money. And nice one, guys. Take care. Enjoy the week off with no UFC next week. I'll be back very soon with another breakdown video. Thank you very much, guys. Take care. Bye.